There we go. Jimmy Fallon voice, and we're back. I don't know if you remember that one. He used to do that with what do you do that? Oh, he did that with Ben Affleck. They did the thing where they were both obnoxious radio DJs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Was that a Saturday Night Live thing, or was that
Yeah,
on
that
the
was
Tonight Show?
Saturday Night Live. Because I never really watched the late night talk shows. I was never into them. I mean, Conan a little bit when he was at his height and everybody couldn't shut up about him, but I'm not really wired that way. I'm not a big Saturday Night Live fan either. Like, I don't really even have an era I think is best. I was always sort of, the show was good sometimes and it wasn't good other times. Is sort of how I viewed it. But we are back, and yeah, Jimmy Fallon wasn't bad. I'm sure
No,
his late night show is not bad either. I don't really know how to judge late night shows.
it's not. As a matter of fact, he's made it better because he has the acting and everything and the comedy experience behind him to be able to pull skits off and stuff in his Tonight Show, as opposed to Jay Leno, which
Yeah, it's cool
I
when they
love.
can do it when they can add in sketches.
Yeah, and especially because like him and Justin Timberlake are like best friends. So Justin Timberlake's always coming on there and they're doing funny stuff all the time, and I just love the two of them together. They're awesome.
Yeah, very good chemistry. I have to say, it's funny. I watched the Bee Gees
I love that
documentary. The Bee Gees documentary, How Do You Mend a Broken Heart? Just about the Bee Gees and their career. and it was funny because they obviously you hear lots of Bee Gees songs throughout it, and it's so funny that when they play that one that they use for the Barry Gibb talk show on like that's all I could think of. I could only associate it as like that song, as like Justin Timberlake and Jimmy Fallon going talking it out on the Barry Gibb talk show. That like I'm replacing the normal words with that because like that's how much I associate with. So
yeah,
not too bad. But yeah,
that's
love
funny.
the Bee Gees. It's a nice documentary. Very somber in some ways, so it's right to have Barry's the last one standing, which must be very hard to see your
the Bee
brothers
Gees
pass away.
was my dad's favorite band, and
It's my dad's favorite band.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
My dad's favorite band.
Yeah,
and I didn't even really know that until he told me recently, because he was into all the music of the era, right? He never really told me a favorite band. And then, like, the second time I watched it, it was this past Christmas when I was at my parents' house, and my dad just said that. I was like, oh, shit. Like, I don't think he had ever actually declared a favorite band. So I didn't even know that until recently. Like, he was a big music fan and into all that stuff, but he'd never actually said who we liked best. But apparently it was Bee Gees.
My dad was a musician, and he was
my dad has no musical talent.
Oh, and my dad taught himself how to play guitar, and he could sing. And him and his twin brother had a band when they were young called twin. My dad was an identical twin. It was called the Sunflower Infantry, which I think is hilarious. I used to make fun of him when I was little about that all the time.
I like it.
Yeah. I grew up listening to my dad, and my uncle playing constantly, in the living room. And my dad had one of those reel-to-reel things like you see in Pulp Fiction.
Oh,
when she plays the music.
Yeah.
And literally that song she plays, my dad had that on reel to reel. So when I saw that in the theater, I was like, oh my God, that's so crazy. Cause my dad used to play the reel to reel of that song all the time. But that's how I was introduced to music like the Beatles and the Bee Gees and all that. And what's that one? The Doobie Brothers, cause my dad would listen to it on reel to reel. So yeah, it started my.
I also was a huge, little music. Fan of music.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, but he did not have any. He didn't have any of the talent. My musical talent comes from my mother. My mother sings and plays piano just like my sister and I, plus some other instruments. But yeah, I feel bad because music. Oh, we're having a bit of a delay. Sorry about that. You go.
That's okay. My mother was a singer and a organist. And so I got a little from both sides, and I did. That was my goal. Was I wanted to be a singer when I grew up, and I never did that, obviously, but I did. That was my.
I sang in a couple garage bands, but they were not serious bands or anything like that.
Yeah, but I never sang with a band.
I mean, I never sang with a good band. If that's any consolation. Although, no, I will say, I don't want to do huge digressions of talking about myself, but a couple times I did go to rock camp. So I did play with somewhat good bands doing the rock camp thing. Not that I got to, especially considering singers were so rare there. So I got to sing a lot because most people weren't there to sing. So like the way they did it, they split us all into groups to make bands, and each of us would get like one of the instructor guys, and he would be part of the band and help you out. And it's funny because I was there when I was 17, and then I was there again when I was 19. I was an adult, and that's really weird circumstances. I want to say. So when I was 19, I had my first year of college, and I was back in my hometown for the summer, and I was working for my first time as a reporter. I was working for the local paper, and my beat was arts and entertainment. And I eventually found out that they were doing another rock, and I was supposed to interview them. And I was like, I was in that camp, and I was supposed to go down and interview the directors of it. And I was like, wow, I was in that camp. And I had a cool schedule. You get a cool schedule if you're arts and entertainment, because that kind of stuff starts a little later in the day. So a lot of people were 9 to 5. I was 11 to 7. So what I did was I thought I would really like to do the camp, which is weird because I was an adult. But I was like, I don't know. I don't get an outlet for this sort of stuff. Do they care? Is there an age limit? Do they care that I'm 19? And I asked my editor, I said, well, what if and I said, it's at this high school and it starts in the morning. It ends at 2 in the afternoon. So I was like, could I switch? I could have the 2 to 10 shift just for that week. And she said, yeah, okay, but you have to like write an article about it when you're done. I was like, oh, great, perfect. So I did it again. I was 19, and that was the better experience. When I was 17, I didn't really like the songs we did, and I didn't. In that time, I wasn't really confident about my singing, so I just played sax. But I was like the main singer in our band, 19, and the songs we did was interesting because they're not songs I would pick, but they were kind of fun. One was, and I am a Beatles fan. We did Day Tripper. So I did Day Tripper, which is not an easy song to sing. It has that build up, that part in the bridge, which is hard. And I was also really worried too about whether I would go high on the last time you do a solo, because it's, going to it took me so long to find out, and I found out. But the last time you're supposed to go up high, you're supposed to go so long, and I was really worried about doing that. And I was like, I'm probably not going to do it live, but I did, and I was happy about that. The other thing was these girls that were in the band, they were the only other horns in the camp. I can't remember. One of them was a tenor sax. I don't remember what the other was. And they picked the other song. They picked, and I was not a fan of this band at all, Dave Matthews Band. And they picked like the only Dave Matthews Band song I've ever heard since that doesn't have an acoustic guitar in it. It's called Angel. It's a song called Angel. And I actually really had a blast singing it, I have to tell you. So, I mean, I wasn't then, and I'm not now a fan of Dave Matthews Band, but it was a pretty cool song, and I enjoyed singing it. And the last one I didn't sing. Our guitarist sort of sang because it was a Jimi Hendrix song. So it's not really singing, right? And it was the let me sleep, let me stand next to your fire thing. It was also a good example of when you're embarrassed when you have singing talent and other people don't. Because I remember we were the horn section in that, and we're just supposed to do the backup singing. So, let me stand next to your fire. That's all it is, right? And he's like telling us to do that, and I do it, and the girls do it, and they're off key and awful. And he's just like, follow him, because they couldn't sing. And I was like, come on, this is not a hard part. It's just let me stand next to your fire. Like, it's not even anything. The name was so embarrassing. So that was fun. And since I'm rambling, I'll just go into my favorite live performance ever. So I was not even, since there weren't a lot of horns, I got to play with a couple other bands for that. And one of the bands did this. They borrowed me because they did a James Brown song, and I did the horn part for them. It turned out that those kids all went to the same high school, and they were in like a little band of their own anyway. And they liked my sax playing, and they played kind of apparently sort of like a kind of a funk fusion thing anyway. And they thought a sax would be good for some of those songs. So like about a few weeks later, there's this lame thing in my hometown called Action Week, which is just, I don't know. They close off a street downtown, not to traffic, and it's all shopping and stuff. But they also let local bands play, and they're all fucking awful. And they were going to do this. So basically, I went over the drummer's house like every night that week, and I rehearsed the songs with them. I made up sax parts, added their songs. They were fun songs. They were most of them didn't have vocals in, but sometimes they had a little bit of vocals in. The bassist would sing them. He was a really talented guy. He was actually on a TV show in Canada on CBC called Rock Camp, which was like Rock Camp, but with real rock stars. And he was on that. So he was a really talented guy. He was a sort of like gangly kid with glasses and kind of like a fro. And he was really talented. He was easily the most talented group. They're all pretty good. So anyway, so what we'd done was we'd rehearsed, I don't know, 6 or 7 of those songs. I had sax parts to it. And so we were playing like a Friday. It was a weird time. It was like Friday at like noon. So basically I had to what I had to do was I had to like meet them early in the morning and do the thing. And I took the morning off. I was allowed to take the morning off. Anyway, we ran through all the songs. We were done. And we were supposed to be packing up. And then they started, and they were just like, "Oh, this is a fun one to do." And they were just screwing around. And this is a big part again of being Canadian. But I don't. Did you ever see the Raccoons? The animated show, The Raccoons. I don't know.
Yes.
But anyway, you can look at.
I feel like I know it. On yeah.
Yeah, it was called The Raccoons. It was an animated show. Probably. Anyway, you can look it up on YouTube too, because it had it. Because like a lot of shows back in the 80s, it had a distinct opening song, had a distinct ending song, and the ending song was sort of like a pop song unrelated to the show, and it was called "Run with Us." And they played "Run with Us," and I was like, "Fuck, that's "Run with Us!" Like they were impressed that I knew it. I was like, "I'm older than you guys, of course I know it, right?" And I said, "We have to perform that." And they're like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "I'll find the lyrics. I will sing this song, even though we've never rehearsed it. Let me do this." And they were like, "Okay." And my sister was actually in Sydney at the time, so I called my parents' house and told my sister to go online and print the lyrics off. So anyway, we ended our set with "Run With Us," even though we'd never done it together before, and they'd never done it with vocals. But again, the bassist did the nice backup, and it was one of the few times I was really feeling it too, because I wasn't supposed to play sax on it, but towards the end, it has a really kind of long fade out section, so I was just like, yes, and I just ripped an awesome sax solo through it, like, touched by God. Like most of the times I'd screw it up, but everything was perfect. It was great. And it sucks that, that nobody was really recording it, because even if it didn't sound as good as it sounded in my head, it was great. It was like the performance of my life. I loved it. It was so fun. But yeah, look up "Run With Us." It's a really cool song. I will. I know you would enjoy it. But anyway,
I will.
We will get back to somewhat topical. So we were talking about sort of horror movies becoming a big deal in your life very early on, actually, earlier than for me.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, when you go from there, it wasn't until I was so I was like most kids. I like movies, and I grew up with movies. I rented movies. I went to the movies. But even when I got to like college, I was like 18, I did not really consider myself like an authority on movies or a big movie fan. There were things that mattered more to me. And I had a roommate, my friend Shane, turned out to be one of my best friends ever. And he was like a movie guy. And he's really responsible for me sort of transforming. And I also had another friend named Sam who lived around there too. And he was a big David Lynch guy, and he liked the weird stuff. And he really got me into that. So that's really where my transformation happened. So it was a little bit later in life for me. And even by the time I started doing stuff on YouTube, which is about, I don't know, 2009 or something like that. I just did I did Cold Talks comics, and I just did little crappy videos about comics and stuff. But Ryan had become part of the horror community, doing his own horror things. And we were both in Sydney at the same time, and I did a Friday the 13th marathon with him and a couple of our other friends. We marathoned the movies for hours. And I was on the computer a lot, and that's where I first met Orc. And it was during this time, I guess, because I was babbling nonstop, and I would talk about all the things that interested me and things like that, that I guess Pezel was watching, and he was impressed. And I guess that's why he wound up inviting me when he created the show, because it didn't really make sense, because other guys had like these established horror channels. And he asked me, and I was just like, my channel has like no subscribers, and I talk about comics. He's like, yeah, but I know you know your stuff. I've seen you talk. And I was like, good enough. So that's how it sort of worked for me. So I was going to say, getting back to you, sort of, was there a point in your life where there was kind of a switch or was it just always that love for movies? And also, then you can talk about sort of your entry into this world of blabbing about movies on YouTube and things like that.
Okay, so when I think about it, actually, my love for storytelling started with books when I was little.
Same here.
My mom was very, very like adamant about, reading to me constantly, and me having an interest in books. And she was very interested in storytelling and movies and stuff like that. So she kind of fueled it in me by reading me, Grimm's fairy tales. I loved Grimm's fairy tales. I made my mom read Sleeping Beauty to me so many times, over and over, right there. Over and over and over again. And she started to realize, well, Jami likes the darker stuff. I always grabbed on to the darker things. And after the Jaws stuff, um, she noticed that every time the Halloween commercial would come on TV, I would stop dead in my tracks and watch the Halloween commercial and then go back to whatever I was doing when it was finished. And I remember it clear as day, clear as day. I was always
Mhm.
fascinated with that Halloween commercial. And between that and going to see Star Wars at the theater when I was 5, that
Oh,
solidified
yeah.
between Jaws, the storytelling, the commercial, and then Star Wars. That solidified it. I was definitely going to be into movies after I saw Darth Vader
Right.
bigger than life walking in. There's this big white screen, and this big dark black Darth Vader walks into the screen with that breathing, and you're like, oh my, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. So I that really solidified it for me. As far as being interested in
Yeah.
movies. The next thing that I can tell you, I went to see after that, I remember going to see Star Trek the movie with my mom, the
Oh,
first one. And that
yeah.
also, because of the visuals in that, that really started me on a journey towards being interested in particularly epic visual movies, which is how come I
Okay, yeah.
ended up getting into David Lynch, I think. That really, when
Ah,
I think about it, it all kind of has a timeline. Um I didn't watch David Lynch until it was The Elephant Man. It was 1980 or 80, was it 80 or 81? It was
80,
second
yeah.
grade.
Mhm.
My teacher showed
Still, I mean,
us
that's
that movie in class.
tremendously young for that sort of movie, yeah.
It is, but she wanted to teach us about Joseph Merrick. So
Mm,
she brought it in and showed us this movie in second grade. And between that and all the other stuff, it started me on this journey. I begged my mom, please, mom, my babysitters wanted to watch Friday the 13th. Okay, when it came
mm,
out on HBO, and they knew my mom had HBO and that they could con my mom, into going out that night so they could come over and watch it. When I figured out that was going on, I said, please, 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 mom, can I watch it? Can I watch it? I was 8 or 9,
yeah.
probably. And she's like, all right, you can watch it. But if it scares you, and I'm never ever going to let you do anything like this again. And I was like, all right. And
Mhm.
sure enough, I sat down with my babysitters and I watched Friday the 13th back in like the end of 1980 or 1981, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And that was it. I was on a journey from that moment on. I was going to be heading towards horror, heading towards the weird, heading towards the visual spectacle type movie. And it just, I had way more refined taste than any of my friends growing up. No, none of my friends could understand,
Yeah.
my wanting to be in the house constantly watching HBO, but I was that kid, you know.
Yeah, I mean, when I look back on it, I think I always sort of had those tastes too. I just didn't think about it. Like I said, I didn't really reflect on it too much until I was a bit older because I didn't want to consider myself as a cinephile or any sort of authority on movies. Maybe I felt like I don't know. I had a lot of doubt about various things growing up, which in retrospect are ridiculous. For instance, it was as a comic book fan. It sounds hard to believe, especially with the way that the landscape is. But when I was getting into comics in the '90s, this is like the early '90s, I found it incredibly intimidating, and I did not want to I didn't like going to the store or anything like that because it was just such a different atmosphere back then. I was worried, like if you didn't know what you were doing, you kind of it was not an inclusive place. It was not inclusive like it is now. It was not mainstream or anything like that. So even though it's not like a real fear, no one's really gonna like mock you or anything like that. But I mean that whole comic book guy thing from the Simpsons, that's based on that world, and that's how it started.
Mm.
You know, you have gatekeepers and people that thought they knew everything, and I just didn't want to look like I didn't know what was going on and stuff. So I didn't really even get over that fear until I was again about 18, 19 when I started collecting seriously. So I always had weird ideas of being an authority on a subject or being, instead of just enjoying it and saying I like it, I always had weird hangups about things. So, I mean, I think I had sophisticated taste too as far as movies went, but I didn't dwell on it because I didn't I didn't want to think about it, I guess, in a way. I don't know. But yeah, same for me. Books were my first and always best love. And that's, like it says, storytelling, same thing.
Yeah.
Endlessly reading. And my sister, even more so than myself. My sister's 3 years older than me, but we were close and we read together. And I mean, so many things I never would have found if she hadn't turned me on to them. It's also why I read a lot of female centric books growing up. I read The Babysitter's Club and things like that. And I don't know, I kind of liked it because I liked this view into the girl world, to tell you the truth. Like, I actually found some of it kind of interesting. I mean, not all of it, but some of it. So that's that. So always
That's
been
funny because
books for. It's always been books first.
I caught my brother reading my Sweet Valley High books when I was a teenager.
Yeah, she had those too.
I caught him
Yeah.
reading my Sweet Valley High books.
Yeah, I read a couple of those too. I didn't stick with them. I didn't like them very much, but I did like Babysitter's Club. And Phyllis Reynolds Naylor did those books, those Alice books. You might remember Alice this, Alice that. Anyway, I read a lot of those growing up, and some of them were kind of tittillating because there'd be things like they'd have like sleepovers and talk about boys. I'm like, I wonder if this is like accurate, because you don't know your boy. So it was interesting stuff. It's funny. I remember like a few years ago, like 10 years ago or something, my sister showed me like that author's like fan website where girls would like, I guess, like write in questions. And I'm like, oh, the questions were so embarrassing and terrible. And she tried her best to give them good answers. And it just makes you think, it's like, wow, these kids' parents don't tell them anything because like they had some really out there, bizarre questions. So I mean, I get it, they're young girls, but still, it's kind of. I wish I could come up with a good example off the top of my head, but some of it's just like, wow. Like they're really out there. They weren't all sex questions, but some of them were, of course. And
that's why I'm
really
glad I had hippie parents, because they told me anything I needed to know, and they trusted me fully. So I grew up with very.
That's another thing where I was glad about books. Yeah. See, my parents were willing to give me the information. I just did not want it from them at all. So my parents realized this, so they provided the reading material. Like my father did have a sex talk with me when I was like 10, and all it did was just make me want to like sink into the floor. I did not want to talk about this stuff with my dad. It made me. It was awful. Like I was always had a good relationship with my parents, but there were certain things I just would not want to share with them, and that continues to this day. So I mean, it's always interesting that people have like a more sort of friends relationship with their parents, because I'm like, no.
Well, I come from I come from a broken home, and my parents, even though they were divorced and separated, and my dad got remarried and all that, I still I never felt like I only had one parent at a time. I never felt like that. It was always like, my parents were communicating with each other constantly, planning things together, telling, to train us kids in a certain way. So I always felt like, a lot of my friends who also came from broken homes, I felt bad for them because a lot of times, one of their parents was like either missing or they only saw him every once in a while. And here I was like, if I did anything wrong, my mom would get on the phone and call my dad and say, Jamie's blah, 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 blah. And then my dad would come over and, I'd get a talking to, or sometimes I remember one time my dad threatened me with the belt, but my mom and my stepmom both got up and got in the way and said, you can't do that to her anymore. She's 12, because when I was little, my dad was, I never got the belt except for one time. I think I got the belt when I was really little. But that's because, and I didn't blame my dad for this, we could have started a house fire. Mark and I, my brother, decided that we thought that, the ceiling light with this big string hanging down looked so fun to like Tarzan off of, and onto the bed. And so we
you can't put full weight on that.
Yeah, we get up onto the top of the dresser, and then we would get on and jump over the bed, and it was working out great at first until my dad caught on, and Mark and I both got the belt that night. And that's the only time I can remember ever getting hit with the belt, and it was just the one time on the butt, and he never did it again after that. So, but I don't blame him, because if we would have tore that right out of the ceiling, oh my God, that would have been terrible.
Right. So that's another big thing about your generation was Generation X is you're the first generation to grow up where divorce was common.
Yeah.
Before that, divorce was almost unheard of. Even in the worst marriages, people stayed together. It wasn't until your parents' generation came along and changed that. So yeah, so people born in your era were the first to grow up with that, and it really reflected the darkness in their art. And me being 10 years younger, this was the generation I looked up to. So all that stuff that was taking place in the late 80s into the 90s, when all these artists were hitting their creative strides, they were all the people I looked up. Then it all had sort of a darkness to it, and and comics that went overboard. It's called the dark age of comics, and I would say you can like sum up like 1993 pretty well. It's like the year Batman got his back broken and got replaced by a crazy lunatic. Superman died. Venom had his own series. The Punisher was as popular as could be. In the world of video games, Mortal Kombat was the most popular thing, made by Gen Xers like Ed Boon and Tobias. Tobias. And of course, you had the grunge music and all those people. People like Kurt Cobain was born in '67. Rob Liefeld, the artist, was born in '67. I mean, and even in like something like Mega Man, I did a playthrough of it. Mega Man X came out. So Mega Man was this cutesy game, but Mega Man X was sort of like the 90s gritty Gen X version of it. It's like Mega Man's now like not so cutesy, and he's in a dystopian future and all this stuff. So it really hit a high point of that. And that was all the stuff that I grew up on. So sometimes people criticize some of that, and it's true. Some of it went overboard, particularly in the world of like comics, because you would look at stuff like that, like Alan Moore did Watchmen, and people learned a lot of the wrong lessons from that. Like they took more of the shallow approach of like, oh, dark and gritty, that's all that matters, right? Like it doesn't really matter the underlying themes or anything like that. And comics and things just became about like over the top violence and that kind of stuff. But still, I have a certain fondness because of the age I was, and that was my entry point into comics. And again, it was reflected in all sorts of media in there. Like, I mean, it's still one of my favorite movies ever, but I mean, I can't tell you how much I like love The Crow. The Crow was like my goddamn identity, that movie, when it came out, pretty much. Like I
love
loved
The
it.
Crow.
It's dark, industrial feel, yeah. Right.
So much. I have 3 versions of it. I have 3 different copies of The Crow because I kept on buying it on accident. I forget I had it, and I was like, oh, The Crow, and I pick it up. It was when I was going through my I'm going to rescue everything out of the Walmart bins thing.
Yes.
Now Walmart has no bins, so.
So, I mean, even though I'm only like 11 around that time and movies aren't as big a deal yet, that was one of the outliers. Like The Crow was huge to me. And the year before that, again, 93, was Jurassic Park. So I didn't, I didn't have a Jaws or a Star Wars, but I had Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park was the first movie I ever, again, because this is before the internet, before everything is, before everything is like fed to us way beforehand, nowadays when we know a movie starts development. But, this is the first movie I ever like anticipated. Like it was in magazines and newspapers. They were talking Jurassic Park. They're going to make a movie about Michael Crichton's novel with dinosaurs. Spielberg's directing it. And I remember in the months, that was the first movie I ever anticipated and followed. And then I got chickenpox and couldn't go.
Oh no!
I didn't get to see it in theater till 2010. And I saw it. I've seen it a couple times in theater, including once for like a re-release of the 3D kind of thing. So I did eventually get to see it. But yeah, that was the first movie in my life that I really truly anticipated, and I couldn't go see it. I mean, it probably might have still been at the theater. I don't know what happened, but anyway, maybe I just didn't want to go because all my friends had already gone or something. But yeah, when it first came out, I was like smacked with chickenpox.
Jurassic Park was one of the very first movies that my husband and I ever went on a date to see, and it's kind of special to me because our relationship pretty much coincides with all the releases since. We've gone to see them all in the theater. Same with Scream. Like Scream was one of our first dates too. And well, actually we'd been together about almost 2 years by then, but still it was still a movie day that to me is in the beginning and very important. So it kind of coincides with our relationship. Yeah. We just celebrated 28 years together.
Dating is why I've seen, sorry. Oh, wow. Well, congratulations. That's awesome. Dating is why I've seen so many bad movies in the theater in the early 2000s. Like I already knew they were bad, but I went, for an excuse to go on the date with the girl. So that's why like movies that I normally wouldn't even touch, I did. I saw lots of bad movies like in the early to mid 2000s on dates with various girls because it was a date. It was an excuse to go out. So whatever. So I saw all sorts of crap then. Not that I didn't see crap on my own growing up, because you do when you're a kid. I was talking about 1998, what an awful year that was. Not that there weren't good movies in 98, but I don't remember them really hardly. Because I can remember I saw Lost in Space in 98 in the theater. I saw The Avengers in the theater. I saw whatever the fuck Steven Seagal movie that was might have been The Patriot or something in the theater, and this is all
Yeah.
98. So I mean, those are all like brain meltingly bad movies. Not just bad, but like you like nobody blamed you for walking out. They were that bad, and I saw them all in 98. Saw Power Rangers
98.
Turbo. That might have been 98 or 90. Is that 98? Maybe it's 99. I only went to that because it was out of sympathy for a friend who was a fan. He wanted to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, see,
So
Power
it was a
Rangers came
terrible run.
after
I know
my
actually
day.
good movies came out in 98, but I didn't see them. Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Well,
gonna say I saw
I was like the
Stigmata that
exact age
year.
for it, but I didn't like it.
I was gonna say I saw Stigmata in 98. I saw Urban Legend in 98. Oh gosh, I'm sure there's a lot more I could think of if I sat here, but we were back then, like between like the early 80s and then the early 2000s. I literally was at the movie theater constantly. Like even when I was younger, my mom was taking us to the movies constantly. She took me to see Blue Velvet when I was 12. Believe it or not.
Yeah.
And my brothers too. And she, I don't think she realized what she was taking us to, but when she figured it out, I was just looking at her out the corner of my eye when Frank Booth comes out with that, that tank, and he starts doing that. I'm like, okay, I got to be totally cool so my mom doesn't freak out and so that I don't freak out. So I acted like it didn't bother me one
I still
bit.
couldn't watch that scene with my mother.
You wouldn't
I couldn't
believe
watch
stuff
that scene with
watched
my mother
mom.
now. I mean, no,
My
I
mom
mean, I
and
have actually. We've watched a lot of horror together. There were times where I had landed back in Sydney with like a broken life and nothing to do, and she would watch. That's how she got into horror, because she was curious. So she actually did watch a lot of horror and slashers with me, on and off over the years at times when I was back there. So it's not like we didn't ever watch anything together. But yeah, I can't watch Frank Booth going around going "baby wants to fuck" or whatever. No,
I
that's a
know
bit
it was
much.
very uncomfortable, I have to
Very
say,
uncomfortable.
but she was like, she said to me even just recently, I am so glad that I let you watch all those movies, because she's so happy that I'm doing all of this now. She loves Piz, she follows him, and she constantly is liking his stuff on Facebook. I'm like kind of embarrassed by it. And I'm like, oh my God. Cause she's like, I don't know, 67 or something. I don't know. But yeah, so she's very glad that she didn't stop me from pursuing these movies that I wanted to see, because I really would like get out of the movie and I'd critique them. Even back then when I was like, little, I'd come out and say, yeah, this is what I thought of Gremlins. I saw Gremlins and I saw all those, I saw all those movies growing up, pretty much anything. And then not just that, but I had HBO, Showtime, or whatever it was. I would always have at least one movie station throughout those particular years.
Yeah, I had movie
And
station back then. It would have been TMN in Canada,
yeah,
which had
well,
some HBO on it.
I literally would watch those like all day long. So I was watching, like, if it wasn't MTV on, it was a movie station. So I was constantly seeing movies repeatedly over and over and over again. And then when it got to be about 2003, my cousin started working for the cable company. And she's like, hey, I can get you a deal. You can get literally all of the movie stations, all of them, for $99 a month for such a time. And I was like, sure, because that was like 25 different movie stations: Cinemax, the HBO, the Movie Channel, Showtime, Stars, like all of them, Epics, the whole thing. And so I literally throughout like the last like 15-year period saw constantly, repeatedly, movies over and over and over again, like especially all of my favorite horror movies. My particular favorite genre or time period for horror, and you're probably not going to agree with me on this because I already heard you say something about it, but I love the early 2000s horror, early 2000s to 2010. I really like that particular time period for horror.
Well, that
Not
was the
like the
time of the
torture porn.
remakes, right?
Some of it, yes. Like I'm talking like from the mid 90s really too, because basically when Scream came out, I had pretty much given up on there being any more good horror movies. I was like,
Right. The first
there's
half of the 90s is a wasteland for
yeah.
horror.
I walked in to go see In the Mouth of Madness, and I looked around the theater and there was like nobody in there except me and my husband. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh
I
my
didn't know it
God.
existed when that came out.
Yeah, see, I was full grown adult then. So I went to
Yeah.
see it, and I was like, this is a fantastic movie that everybody's freaking missing because nobody's coming to it. Because at the time, nobody was going to see horror that much. But when Scream came
Yeah.
out, I was like, oh my God, this is genius, and this is going to bring it all back. And I saw it all coming, and I was like, this is great. So after that, I went to literally every single thing that came out, all of the new
Mm-hmm.
horror movies, and I fell in love with them. I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend. Then when they start getting into stuff like The Haunting, 13 Ghosts, House on
I
Haunted
saw The
Hill,
Haunting.
I
I
love that
saw
movie.
The Haunting in theater. Yeah,
I I
I
really
don't like
really
it.
liked it.
I like the original, but I don't like the. That's another
I
bad
love the
movie
original.
experience for me at the
I
theater.
I really do. I love the original with all my heart, but there's something about that remake that it was just so I was into this like glossy, slick horror at the time, and I just was enjoying myself seeing
Sure,
all
I
of
like some of
these.
it too.
Yeah, like 13 Ghosts still holds up to this day. I don't care what anybody
That
says.
movie, I just really hated the main character. Is the main
Oh,
thing for me on The
the one
Haunting was
played
the
by
one
Tony
the one that
Shalhoub.
actually has the connection with that with the connection with the house, or the one that has the connection with the house. The woman,
Uh,
I don't know, the woman who is
uh,
not Catherine Zeta-Jones. I couldn't stand her.
oh,
Couldn't stand her character.
oh, Eleanor. You're talking about the haunting?
Yeah,
Yeah, Eleanor.
yeah. That's the main reason I didn't like that movie, is because I hated her character so much. I mean, the rest wasn't terrible or anything. It was okay, but yeah. I mean, I like a lot of those neo slashers too. Although I didn't see too many of them in the theater. I mean, here and there. And that was the other thing about some of the horror in the '90s. I mean, I couldn't. I didn't get to go see R-rated movies, when I was that age.
Yeah.
So the way I saw R-rated movies was at home, late at night on those channels. And that was the one thing I can say. Like, my parents didn't take me R-rated movies, but I didn't ask them to either.
Yeah.
And they never cared about what I was watching. And that's when my love affair, which is continued with late nights, started. I was about 10, 11. And then I started realizing it's so different from today now in the age of streaming and stuff. Jay and I have talked about it, but TV changed after a certain time. It would show
Yeah.
stuff it wouldn't show, and I wanted to be around for it. And that, coupled with the fact that the internet was becoming a thing, and in the computer, our computer, I spent in our house, we had a large house, but I spent most of my childhood in the basement, because that was the TV that had the Nintendo and the various systems on it as I grew up. So that's where I played my video games, and that was where the family PC was too, which I would use late at night to peruse various corners of the internet. Because you remember, you're old enough, you remember the
I
internet was
remember
very
dial
different
up,
back then. It's not like now with its chat rooms and its
52K
things,
and
yeah, all that stuff.
Windows
I mean,
95.
I know
And
I'm not as old, but yeah, I mean, there's so many people now. It's crazy because it makes you feel old. They grew up with the internet. I can remember a time before the internet. You can more so than me, but I mean, I can remember a time before the internet. But I remember those awkward first few years with the dial-up and things like that. So that's when I
yes.
really got into just late nights in general, but also what the content that came along with it, which might have been horror or it might have been soft core stuff that would show up on things like Showcase, like Red Shoe Diaries. Like, yeah, you better believe I watched that. Bravo used to also show softcore nudity in various forms, but I
Mhm.
mean, also good movies snuck in there from time to time. You go back, Jay and I a few years ago did an episode on the City of Lost Children. That's how I saw it. I saw it late at night, I think on either Showcase or Bravo. I didn't know what the hell it was, but I was entranced and I watched it. So it was really great for stumbling across things that I would not have heard of otherwise. The internet was not what it was now. You couldn't just
Yeah.
find things, and you didn't really know what to look for either. So very transformative time for me. So I mean, like I said, I talk about like making it sound. I always make it sound like I made a decision when I was 18 or 19 to like get more into movies. But the truth was, it's an evolution. It was always sort of happening. It just took me a while to sort of acknowledge it, I guess, is what it was. Because up to that point too, as much as I was a fan of movies, I couldn't name a lot of actors. I certainly couldn't name a lot of directors and things like that. But you build that up over time, unconsciously. Really, you don't even have to try. Eventually, you just start putting together. It's the same thing when I entered comics. I was like, am I really going to remember who wrote what and who drew what? Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I know. I can name many artists. I can name many writers. It just becomes automatic, and you remember who
Yeah.
did what, and you have favorites. This person did
Uh-oh. You're froze.
I think we share.
Oh,
So
you're
we'll go
back.
back when I was saying about how horror was kind of a wasteland, at least in the first half of the 90s. Still here?
Yep. Yep, you're back now.
Does it go there now?
What?
I'll wait.
I think you have a delay.
Okay. How about now? Things seem normal to me, not
Yeah.
to you?
No, I can hear you just fine.
Darn.
Everything's fine
It was
now.
going so well. Okay, you can hear me, but I realize we are dealing with a delay. So I was saying, like, yeah, definitely the 90s, the first half was difficult for horror, not a lot. You know, if you're going to find horror from there, it's pretty obscure. I mean, there's some sitting on little islands, like a little island for slashers is like Candyman in 1992. Like, it's there, but there's not really anything else. But the whole decade, I think, unless you count Disney animated films, which do count and are important and a big part of me and everything, but it's fantasy. Fantasy was so big and alive in the 80s and was such a great thing. So many classic fantasy from the 80s. And then the 90s, it just stopped. And I mean, we had a renaissance of that too, because two big things coincided. In 2001, they did the first Lord of the Rings and the first Harry Potter. So, you know, that kickstarted things going to the 21st century. But in the 90s,
I was excited about that
name
too.
some like live action fantasy. Yeah. And yeah, that's something I'm thinking about down the road for us. But yeah, like what was like good live action fantasy from the 90s? I mean, I did name one, but it's an obscure French movie. But I mean, it's so hard to come up with live action fantasy from the 90s.
Yeah, I can only think
it was
of
like dead.
Lionheart, or is that what it's called? No, not Lionheart. Dragonheart with Dennis Quaid.
Right.
And then
pretty forgettable movie, like not terrible, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I remember it, but I'm weird, so
yeah.
I mean,
I remember too.
I just love Dennis Quaid.
One of the many movies I saw in Ryan's basement. Saw a lot of movies on video and Ryan's basement. I guess I need to see it again. It's been many years since I've seen it. I remember it okay, but yeah, I mean, obviously I like it. It has a dragon in it.
Sean Connery as the dragon is so good, and Dennis Quaid, I just absolutely love him. No matter what he does, he's always good. It's a winner for me. I just really love that guy.
He is good.
Even Jaws 3. Even Jaws 3.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just unbelievable how these things run in cycles. Because if you think of the 80s fantasy, it's, it almost overwhelms you. It's like the never-ending story, legend.
Dragon Slayer. Lady Hawk.
What's the sword one? The Excalibur 81.
Excalibur. Yeah. Conan.
Conan the two Conan movies, not one but two Conan, and even a Red Sonja movie. Not that it was any good, but it existed. Yeah, it's Conan fun. It's a fun movie.
I love those. Made me fall in love with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I've been a huge Arnold Schwarzenegger fan ever since. He does no wrong in my book either. I literally love everything he's in. I just love that guy.
Yeah. That's interesting too, because of my age and things, like most people, I think he was the Terminator before I saw him as anything else. Probably I saw him as the Terminator first, which is cool, but it doesn't have much personality or flair to it because he's supposed to be a robot. Right. So it's interesting that you really you fell in love with him watching him play Conan, who is a much more charismatic character. So you can understand that for sure.
I saw that at the drive-in.
Yeah, the 80s was just so loaded.
It was fantastic at the drive-in. I mean, it was absolutely awesome at the drive-in. And I just was hooked ever since. He's so funny. He's so funny without trying to be. And I love that. I love that about him.
I think he can count the number of movies I've seen at the drive-in on one hand. I don't think I've seen like more than 5 or 6. And and those and usually I would see like double features, so that's only like maybe like 3 trips to the drive-in all told. Just too bad, and they weren't good movies. I remember in 2002 I went on a date with a girl, and it was a triple thing, but I had to work, so I got there late. And I don't remember what the first movie we came for like the end of was, what was it? It was Men in Black 2. Then it was Mr. Deeds, which is god awful. and another god-awful movie, Enough. They're both terrible. I mean, that's okay because I had other things to do, if you know what I'm talking about. But I just mean, I did see those
Yeah.
movies again after the fact, and those aren't movies you're going to really remember as a great drive-in. Oh wow, Enough. Like, look, it's J Lo doing some kickboxing. Or Mr. Deeds this is even back when Adam Sandler was still supposed to be pretty good, and he just sleepwalks through that movie. It's such a lame movie.
Yeah.
So not a
It's
good
not
triple
one of my
bill.
favorites.
Arguably the best movie we missed most of. We only got there for like the last 10 minutes of the best movie, Men in Black 2, which is not great, but certainly better than those movies. So, and I've seen a couple other things, but never got to see any cool like movie that you consider like a great experience or a classic. Unfortunately, the drive-in theater still operates in my hometown from time to time, but I never think about it.
Oh,
I think it's still technically alive somehow on life support. Don't ask me how.
I love going to the drive-in.
Must just
It's
do
like
like
a
special
major
events
thing.
now and again.
Oh yeah, like Bruce Campbell has been traveling around the drive-ins, doing a tour around the drive-ins. Last summer he did it, and he was doing it the summer before. And I keep on wanting to catch him, but I have to drive probably 6 hours to get someplace where he's going. He wouldn't be coming to my local drive-in. There's no way. It's so small. So yeah. And there's a few around me, and we still go to them every once in a while, but I haven't been to the actual drive-in in a while now.
Yeah, our drive-in, I'm sure lots of drive-ins used to do this. Used to do a thing called Dusk Till Dawn, where they play movies like all night. And I had friends, and I think Ryan went to a couple, and I can't remember the circumstances, but I never got to go to one, which is too bad. And again, this was mostly high school kids going so they could drink and fool around. So not too many people focusing too much on the movies, but still would have been a cool experience. But I never actually got to go. But,
I saw Twister at the drive-in.
Younger generations don't have any connection to. Oh yeah, Twister.
Yeah, and that was weird.
I'm not a fan of that movie, but I think it works well for the drive-in because it's sort of a big movie. It's kind of a spectacular visual thing again, kind of.
Yeah, and it has that drive-in scene where the tornado comes right through the screen, and it's really weird and kind of surreal when you're sitting.
I didn't even remember
watching that. Yeah, it was kind of cool.
That's true. I didn't even remember that. I forget most of that movie. But yeah, I think fantasy is something we share and something I don't get to talk too much about with other people. Not that they don't like them, but I don't think they love them because a lot of like my favorite movies fall under that category. And like you said, like 2001 was such a special year because of the kickoff of those two big fantasy franchises. It's also the year maybe tied for second favorite movie ever came out was Spirited Away, and I loved all the Studio Ghibli movies more than anything, and that's my favorite by far. Spirited Away was a life-changing movie for me, and I did see that in the theater by some miracle, and it just, I don't know, just changed me forever probably, and I've always been a big Studio Ghibli fan, and most of those movies are fantasy one way or another. I mean, I talk about favorite directors, and it's always a little different if you're talking about animation, because a director of animation is a little different. It's a different thing than being a live action director. But I mean, if you're just talking about a director who did the most movies that you like, well, then obviously it is Hayao Miyazaki for me, by far. Like movies in my top 100, he did like all his movies are in there probably. So it's, if you're just talking about that, but yeah. So my favorite stuff in books too is fantasy. Not that I read everything, but I just mean, and it's 2001 was sort of the culmination of visual effects sort of catching up to some of it, finally, because it would have been very difficult to do a Lord of the Rings movie in the 80s without it looking kind of silly. Not that it couldn't be done. There's 80s movies that have decent effects that show up well. Willow's a good one, for instance, which is another one that Jay and I covered.
They did an animated Lord of the Ring movies in, was it the early or late 70s, early 80s? Right. I can't remember exactly.
So it's Ralph Bakshi. I don't know how much you know about Ralph Bakshi, but so I have very complicated feelings about him. Right, I have very complicated feelings about him, but the truth is, mostly I respect the hell out of him because of the stuff he did. Most of his stuff doesn't really turn out the way I want it to, but I get the feeling behind it. And plus, his movies are all struggle. He never had yeah, so that was supposed to be finished. If you remember that movie, it takes place over Fellowship and goes into the second book and
Yes.
stops at the Battle of Helm's Deep, and then that's it. And they didn't make another movie because they ran out of
Yes.
money. So,
Yes.
and there's things about that movie I respect and think are cool, but there's so much about it I despise. Like I hate so much of the character designs. Like I just couldn't understand the thought process that went into some of those character designs. Remember I mentioned I had a friend Sam, he was the David Lynch fan. He
Hmm.
said he watched that movie when he was a kid with his little sister, and when she saw the character Sam, the Hobbit, he was so crappy that she like burst into tears because it was her favorite character, and she couldn't stand how stupid he was in the movie. So I mean,
Oh,
that movie's I think of like as a noble failure. It had some good things going for it. It had art design by Mike Ploog, who was a great artist, great comic book artist in the 70s, did a lot of great fantasy. I think he did some of those Conan comics too. So that movie, yeah, like Ralph Bakshi, we don't have time for me to get into it, but yeah, I'm very conflicted because I don't think most of the movies turned out the way he wanted them to. He was very constrained by budget and things like that. Plus, he was always trying to go against the grain. He wanted his movies to be adult. You know, he's the guy that did Fritz the Cat. You know, so
yeah.
he was always pushing the envelope and showing the same thing that I'm endlessly arguing. Even in 2022, it's so hard that we still live as kind of somewhat in the animation age ghetto, where people regard animation as a genre instead of a medium, which is insane. But you know, he was one of the earliest people to fight against that and have truly adult stuff that you it wasn't just not for kids, but you better not show it to kids because you know, it's not right for kids. Yeah, but 78 was a good year. It was the same year that Watership Down came out, which is
Yes, and
amazing.
I watched that same year. We watched those in school. I
Yeah, it's
remember
cool.
watching them in my library class, which
Yeah, I think I've
is
met other people
strange
that
now.
also saw it in school, so it's not as strange as you say. Because I'm almost positive I didn't, but I've known other people that had that experience. Like that's how they saw it in school, which is
Yeah.
pretty cool because it's a good movie and a good book.
Yeah, Watership Down really messed me up, and I also read that book when growing up because we had to read it for English class
Yeah,
at
I got
one
over
time
there.
or another, and it really messed me up. I was like, "This is nasty. This is terrible." I felt like it gave me those same feelings that I had when I was reading or when I went and saw Bambi the first time, and
Mm.
I was like, I freaked out the first time I saw it. That was actually the true first movie I ever saw is Bambi,
It's the
and
first
my
movie I ever saw in theaters. They did a re-release in '87. It was the
oh
first
really?
movie I ever. It's the first movie I ever saw in theaters.
Yeah, it's the first movie I ever saw, period, and it was at a drive-in, and my parents, again, were out on a date, and this was long before they got separated, though, but I remember it because I was upset about the mother, being trapped in the fire, and I
Yeah.
got super upset because I had just been recently burned, and so that really, really bothered me, and it stuck with me my whole life, and then I also looked at my mom and said, "You can't die," and she's like, "Don't worry, I'm not going to die." Because, and every single kid that went and saw that movie always has that same story. I saw it and it devastated me and made me think my parents were going to die. So
Hmm.
I have to blame Disney for always thinking my parents were going to die on me because that really messed me up.
That forest fire scene is so spectacular. I
It
mean, that was
is.
1941. You
I
know,
know.
such animation, such wonderful animation.
I just recently rewatched Snow White because I wanted to prove somebody wrong about the Snow White Hi Ho song. Is because there's this person, Mandela man, and he believes in all these Mandela effects, right? But I get really irritated by this kind of thing.
Hmm.
And so I'm like, all right, well, if he wants me, I'm going to prove him wrong because he's like, yeah, it turns out that hi ho, off or home or off to work we go doesn't even exist in the song because you look it up on Google and the lyrics don't say it. True, they don't. But if you watch the movie, and you
Right.
watch what's going on, they sing that song more than once. And the
They do.
first two times they sing it, they say, hi ho, it's home from work we go. And the last time, it's off to work we go.
Yep.
That's when
I remember it.
Snow White is telling them goodbye and they're going off to work. And so I made sure I took screenshots and I took down the time stamps and I sent them to him. And it took him 2 weeks to accept it. He was like, I don't even want to look at it. I don't even want to look at it. And I'm like, you
People
are.
don't like being corrected. Yeah.
Oh no, this one doesn't. But there's sometimes I do have an evil side, and he brings it out in me bad. And there aren't many people that can do that, but that guy he brings it out in me because he believes so much crap that is absolutely ridiculous and so easily proved wrong that I'm annoyed by him. I cannot stand people who are absolutely delusional to the point where they won't accept truth.
I mean, I don't like to be petty, but I know that there's a great satisfaction in knowing you're right about something.
Yes, there
And
is.
so sometimes I'm sure maybe I take that too far, but like you said, if you have somebody that's willing to like battle you, so kind of foolishly like that, well, maybe they kind of get what they deserve instead of listening to you. Or
he did come out and he did admit that I was right, and he apologized to me live on camera, on air. So I was like,
that's about as good as it gets. Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, I have a feeling that my old co-host James forced him into doing that, but at least he exonerated me, so
right.
I was happy about that.
So I also have this conflict between movies and books when you have movies based on books, because it took me a long time to really cut movies more slack, because I used to think, here's the book, film it. And, you take a while, you have to realize it's a different medium and you have to make changes and things like that. And that doesn't mean that excuses everything, but it's still to this day a very sort of short list for me of books to movies where I think either the movie is just as good or better. It's pretty rare, but there's a few. Jurassic Park is one. I don't think it's better, but I do think it's probably as good as you could have made the movie. And I didn't even mind the changes too much for the most part. There's still some changes. Like, I thought the lawyer thing was really cheap. Like, in the book, the lawyer isn't just some one-dimensional jerk. Like, he actually does some decent heroic things. He doesn't even die in that. And they just decide to do a cheap death with a snarky lawyer. The lawyer's like, we're gonna make so much money, killed. But yeah. I mean, I like Jurassic Park. Another one is Akira, which is a very long and complex manga. And what they basically did for the movie of it is they basically just took the ending and stuck it at the end of volume 1, which should infuriate me, but doesn't, because it actually works so well and such an amazing movie. People can hear me gush about that and various things, including an entire episode of Movie Discussion Pocket Dimension. So, and The Crow is another one. The Crow is quite different from the comic, but in many ways it's better. As beautiful as the comic is, The Crow makes the characters more interesting. Yeah, the characters outside of Eric himself, the characters don't have much depth or personality. But the movie is full of like great character actors, that inject so much character into them. And Ernie Hudson, to me, like, people want to run up, like, everybody loves Ernie Hudson for Ghostbusters, is fine. But to me, it's the fucking Crow. Yeah. So that's another one. So to this day, I'm always in the fight, especially nowadays. Again, in this age of like big things like Dune, of course, just got. Dune is interesting because I don't have any quarrel with it. It's a rare one. So usually when you're naming these big franchises, I have a long history with them and tons of opinions. Not Dune. Ryan liked Dune. In our teens, he was into the books. He loaned me the first book. I could barely get through it. And I was like, I'm done.
I have it right there.
Yeah.
I have a whole, like, this is my library. I always dreamed in my life that I would have a library of books that I love. And I literally I'm surrounded by books right now.
See, you're like me. See, that's the same thing. I get a certain amount of comfort to be surrounded by them. It's a great feeling to me. It's one of the reasons why, like, I really need physical books, even though, they take up space and things, because I feel very comforted by being surrounded by my books. And it's also why I can enjoy going to a bookstore. Doesn't have to be one of those amazing, little, and of course they're just appearing little Nook used bookstores, but even a chain bookstore. It's funny. Even before COVID and stuff, I wasn't the type of person that touched things. I was very aware when you're out in public, don't touch things.
Yes.
Except when I'm in a bookstore, I'll just walk down the aisle and like just rub my finger across all the spines. And I just get such a feeling of comfort out of that. And it's, you understand, but a lot of people, they can't understand that.
Well, my husband knows every Christmas that when we go to, go out Christmas shopping, we usually spend like 3 days. We'll get a room, in Erie, Pennsylvania, and we'll stay there and do all the Christmas shopping at once. And I spend at least half a day in the bookshop every year. And he knows he's going to have a hard time getting me out of there. And
Right.
if I go there any other time of the year, I won't leave. I'll stay there like all day because I love bookstores. I love the atmosphere, and there's anything I want is around me. I just wish I lived in a library. So
yeah,
yeah.
it was a great feeling. Speaking of which, I don't know if you might know this book. I'm not sure, but wait, I need to think for a second. Okay, so there's a reference to this at least in the movie, although not direct. So you know Royal Tenenbaums, of course.
Yep.
So there's a part in Royal Tenenbaums in the narration where they're talking about the relationship between Luke Wilson's character and Gwyneth Paltrow's, how they were so close growing up. And it says that at one point they ran away and stayed in, like, was it the public archives or something like that?
It was the public library.
Right. So I don't know if you know, but that's the plot of a book. I always get it mixed up because there's a really long title. It's called From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Blah, 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 blah. And it's from like the 60s. It's a kid book. And it's about this girl. She's in a family and she has like several brothers. And she decides to run away. And she carefully selects which brother to take with her. She takes the second youngest for various reasons. And they run away. And they stay in like a museum. And it's the same sort of idea. They hide and they're secretly living in the museum. And the plot kicks in a bit more when they discover, like, I don't know, some sort of weird mystery that they solve, like some decades old mystery. But anyway, it's a really cool book. I haven't read in a million years. But yeah, that book just fascinated me endlessly because it was like sort of like that the kind of kid I was. That was my dream too. Like run off to some library, run off to a museum and live there and just be among the shelves and the things like that.
Yeah.
They talk about it in the Discworld series. What's it called? It's called L space, which is when you're in a place that's like surrounded by books. And I remember where I live, Halifax, like many places, I'm sure. When I first moved here 20 years ago, there were quite a few cool used bookstores around here. I had lots of great finds over the year. They're all pretty much gone now. And there was one right in the downtown that I used to call the L Space bookstore because it was big. It was 2 floors and it was just so winding, and it's everything you expect. You go up, even on the landing and the stairs, there were books, it was all piled, and just imagine endless stacks and rows and things. And I mean, to me, it's just such a comforting feeling. There's a cat around there somewhere. There's always a cat or two.
Yeah.
I mean, those places are disappearing from the world.
Yeah,
they certainly disappeared from my area.
Luckily, I live in a very small town. It's very much like Twin Peaks around here.
Ooh, yeah.
So it's there are.
We'll touch on that before we go.
Oh yeah, we will. Yeah. So there's like small little bookshops all over the place around here, and also I live in a place. There's a lake here, and because of that, there's a lot of tourism. So they have all these quaint little shops all around the lake, antique shops, antique bookstores, all these things. So I can go and get those kinds of things pretty easy. And I really enjoy it because it's what's kept me around here.
Yeah.
I could have left anytime. I really love where I'm from. I really love this little part of New York State. I love that, the National Comedy Center is here now. So there's like major things that are going on in my town now, which I've been waiting for that. It sucks that COVID happened because, they opened the National Comedy Center. It got it won some award for being like the best new like tourist thing in like the country or whatever. And then COVID hit. And so nobody could go. And it was very upsetting because, I mean, they had just opened. But now they're allowing people in again and they're doing tours. And you've got the Lucy and Desi Museum here. That's cool. So there's, you can go visit the ugly Lucy statue, which is absolutely horrendous. I mean, hideous. This thing
I'll have to look it up.
It's bad.
I believe you.
It's there's pictures of it on my Twitter. Okay. Because I went there last summer. I did actually on my YouTube, there's a whole video of me going down into Celeron Park and showing people the old ugly Lucy statue and then the new one that they made for us and how nice that one is. But that old one, oh my God, what the heck is wrong with that? That person has serious problems.
There's a town about an hour from here called Truro. and I can't remember if it was a famous resident or something like that, but there was some guy, and he was like a artist. And throughout the town, you'll find not statues, but like sculptures he did out of wood, and they're kind of like statues, he chainsaw
Mhm.
or like that, and they're very, they're just various things, and they don't look too bad. They're people and things like that. Except there's one that's kind of like in the center, and it's like a man with a dog, and the dog is supposed to be like sort of like jumping up towards him, but it looks like the dog is humping his leg, and that's all anybody really remembers about anything else. Like all the others might be nice, but all anybody can think about that. And there's a joke because Truro was called the hub of Nova Scotia because of where it is geographically. How if you go there, you can get to anywhere sort of from the place. And I think they even at one point had like they had like what's the word I'm looking for, like greeting cards and stuff you could buy with a photo of it, and they called it like the hump of Nova Scotia. And it's like it's funny, like it's only from a certain angle. It just makes me think like that, like all the other, there's nothing wrong with any of the other sculptures. They're all carvings, whatever you want to call them. They're all pretty good, but nobody remembers that or cares because of this one that looks kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah. I was a little bit disappointed that Amy Poehler was here like 3 weeks ago and she told nobody. And I was like, oh man, I could have gone out to dinner at Forte and ran right into her. She didn't want anybody to know. She was here promoting her documentary on Lucy and Desi. And she didn't want anybody to know. She was at the National Comedy Center. I wish I would have gotten an invite to that. Had I have known she was coming, I might have been able to get one because I did modeling for there.
Oh, that's interesting.
Some of their ads have me and my husband and son in them. Because on the day that they were doing the ads, we were also in that spot where that place is, taking pictures of my son for his senior pictures. And they're like, hey, do you guys want to be in these pictures? And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. When I was like 8, I remember some like talent scouts were going through schools looking for like kids, like I guess for like catalogs and stuff like that. And they found my sister. Well, I'm not going to say she wasn't pretty, but I think it was more because she had a sort of a different look. She was a copper redhead with glasses. And they picked other kids too, but I think they really liked her look, and they wanted to use her for something. And then they asked if she had any brothers or sisters, and they said, "Oh yeah, I've got a brother." So they called me out of class, and they were like, "Oh, we love him. He's cute," and stuff like that. And like I remember, like we went home and talked to our parents about it. My mom's like, "Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "No." And she's like, "You don't have to do it." So I mean, I could have been in, I guess, a couple ads, but I was adamant that I did not want to do it. So I guess I'm sure I would not have gone off to an amazing modeling career or anything, but I kind of put my foot down about it from the beginning.
When I was 15, my dad, called me on the phone and goes, hey, I just saw an ad in the paper they're looking for models, this modeling agency. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, you should call it because you're always talking about how you want to, be famous someday. You want to be a model. You want to be an actress. You want to be a singer. You want to be a dancer. I'm like, okay.
All the things.
All of, well, I literally was doing them all. So I can do them all, I think. But where was I? Oh yeah. So my dad tells me about this ad and he doesn't think I'm going to call the number. My mom also tells me about this ad. She doesn't think I'm going to call the number. I call the number. I tell my parents that I got an interview and they're like, well, where do you have to go? And I'm like, Edinburgh, PA, which is like a 5-hour drive. Yeah. And they're like, oh, well, you got to find your own way. So I found my own way. I called my grandparents. My dad wasn't too happy about that, but I looked at him and I said, you told me to find my own way. He's like, yeah, but I didn't mean to call your grandparents and bug them. And I'm like, but they said yes. So my grandparents drive me down there to go to this interview. And I get in there and the woman immediately is like, oh, you have a fresh face. You are the epitome of health. And that is what we're looking for. And I was like, well, how old was I? 15. I was probably, I'm the same height. I haven't grown since 7th grade. I pretty much am the same height and same size and everything. Well, not same size, but
it's pretty clear I wasn't going to grow into a model. I'm too short.
Yeah.
I'm too short.
I went to this interview. They picked me. Well, they told me they might call me, right? So I go home. By the time I got home, they had already called, told my mom they wanted to work with me. My dad was all so happy and so excited because he kept laughing at me because he's like, you actually did it. I said, I told you I was gonna. He didn't believe I would. Well, he brings me to, my first job that I got, and it costs, quite a bit of money to drive 5 hours,
Oh
in
yeah.
1988. And we drove down there. I do my job. It was $20 an hour. Well, I only worked for an hour, so I only made $20. And that was the only job I ever did for them. It was for Nature's Way, health foods.
Oh yeah, I know what that is.
So that's the only ad I ever did for them. And that was the only time I ever, did any modeling. I never got called back for any more. So I only did the one job. My dad spent a whole ton of money, and I only made $20. And he's like, "This is
It's
ridiculous."
a tough business. It's a tough business, right?
Yeah.
You
And
gotta
he's
get
like,
the breaks.
but he's like, you know what? He said, you know what? I'm not even mad. He goes, you can tell people now that you actually modeled, and it's true. And you can write that on a resume. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. So that was a big deal. I even had to go get working papers and everything to do it. So it was like a big deal for me to do that at 15, but I never did do it again.
I recall the episode of that 70s show where Jackie, Mila Kunis's character, is supposedly scouted by this great modeling agency, and she's all excited, and she calls up Donna to tell her. She's like, and I have to go down for my audition or whatever like that. And then she says something like, it's at the World or the America or something like that. Like, I don't know, the something World Modeling Agency headquarters. It's in Sheboygan. That's great.
I haven't watched that 70s show in a long time.
I haven't either. I just remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because you're in Nova Scotia. I love the Trailer Park Boys.
Oh yeah,
love them. Like,
yeah.
I love them.
Yeah, they are like the only celebrities I can ever like say. Like, because they used to 10 years ago, they used to like come into town in character. They go out drinking in bars and stay in character.
Oh my God.
And I witnessed that a couple times, which is pretty fun. I didn't speak to them myself or anything like that, but I did sort of get to see. It's almost interesting because you're at a bar, which is not something I normally do, but people were talking about it, right? And it's almost like watching like this like play in a way. It's like, there's those characters I know from the show, and they're like acting a play out in the bar with just random people who get to be in the play. It's a really interesting thing. It's a cool thing to see.
It's awesome. Yeah. I would die. I would love to meet Bubbles. I really love him.
Yeah, they're really something. I didn't watch all of it, but I watched a lot of it. And Elliot Page, previous Ellen Page, she'd be around, but I didn't see her. It's too bad, because I used to kind of have a weird fixation on her.
She's so pretty. I don't know why she did that.
Yeah, I know. But let's do, because I was eventually going to get into sort of your entry into this. I'm going to assume that was Twin Peaks stuff first.
Yes.
Okay. So let's do
that. So I was sitting watching Showtime one night, and I can't remember what it was I was watching, but all of a sudden a commercial comes on, and it's just the Welcome to Twin Peaks sign and the Twin Peaks music and that road. And that's it. That's all it was. And then it said coming March 2016 or something, or coming 2016 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, this can't be happening. Because I have been a huge fan
since the beginning, right?
Yeah. Of David Lynch even.
And David Lynch even before that, right.
But Twin Peaks was a show that I loved that show. Like, hardly anyone I knew when I was growing up watched that show. I had to wait until accounting class to go in and talk to the nerds about that show, because none of my cheerleading friends were watching it,
This was something that would have been, again, my age too, but like, it's not even something I really heard about. Like, it wasn't until much later that I found out that there had been a show in like 1990, and it was, filmmaker, this was just not something that came up. It wasn't replayed on TV anywhere. Probably the first time I ever knew about Twin Peaks was that flashback on The Simpsons where it's Homer's watching it.
Yeah.
It's like brilliant. I have no idea what's going on, which sums it up very well.
Yes.
That's probably the first time I ever knew anything about Twin Peaks was, sometime in the mid 90s watching that and knowing, okay, that was some weird show. But you were there from the beginning.
My mom came into the bedroom when I was, sitting there doing homework one night, and she's like, hey, your favorite director guy is doing a TV show. And I'm like, oh, cool. What's it called? And she's like, Twin Peaks. And she told me when it was coming on Easter Day. 1990. And I will never forget it. I will forever associate chocolate and Easter Bunny chocolate specifically to Twin Peaks, because not just because of the fact that it's a plot device in the show, but because I literally was eating all my Easter candy while watching the
I actually
pilot.
have that with a couple things too, but anyway, we will stay on this.
And so I fell in love with that show, and of course I already had loved David Lynch and loved all his other stuff, and I loved all the future stuff he did. So anyway, let me get a drink real quick.
Yeah, I will too.
Okay, so basically I saw this commercial and I went running straight to the internet, straight to YouTube, and got on here and typed Twin Peaks in and started looking up everything I could find out about it. That's how I came across Obnoxious and Anonymous channel.
That's Cameron.
Cameron. So Cameron, I'm watching his shows, and he seems to have a huge knowledge of the show. I also have a huge knowledge of the show. So I start typing in comments, and it was immediate. He immediately answered back and was like, hey, you sound like you know your stuff. When we start talking, James from Coffee Time, Twin Peaks Coffee Time, same thing. He started making comments underneath as well. So I started talking to both of them at the same time. Now, this was 2 years at least, or maybe even longer, before I ever even considered being on YouTube.
Right.
So the show comes out every single time. I'm excited. I can't wait for this, show to be over so I can get online and start talking with everybody about the show we just watched. So every single Sunday night, I would wait for, Cameron to come on. We'd all talk about it until he got kicked off. So then I had to find other ways, because unfortunately his channel got shut down like right in the middle of that whole thing. And that was
I heard some of it.
Yeah. So I had to find other ways, but anyway, so that got me into talking to them. Pretty soon, James starts asking me, he's like, hey, have you ever thought about coming on, YouTube and talking about stuff? And I'm like, hell no. I've never thought about doing that, but it sure would be fun. And I think I would like it a lot, because there's nobody around here that I can talk to about Twin Peaks. So I finally, get involved with it. I don't have a camera at first. I just have my microphone. And so my first few shows on Twin Peaks Coffee Time were just my voice and a picture. And so none of them really knew if that was really me or anything. I remember they all debated for a long time if I was even a real person. They looked me up on Twitter.
Talking to an AI. Talking to an AI, of course.
Yeah, because they for some reason they just didn't think I was real. There's also another controversy that I'm not mentioning right now that also got me involved in all of this, but that's like a big I don't like talking about it.
That's fine. I'm not gonna.
It's just really annoying. So,
that's fine. So we'll just stick to whatever you want. We're not
right. So
I'm not
anyway,
going to grill you.
I get involved with Coffee Time. I start appearing just by my voice the first few shows. Then I got a camera and I started coming on. And then I was on there every Sunday, almost every single Sunday for 2 years. And I enjoyed every minute of it. I really did. I really didn't necessarily want to stop doing it when I did, but there was a lot of behind the scenes tension going on, and I definitely I couldn't handle it anymore. I was just tired of this tension that I was constantly feeling in regards to trying to get along with everybody on the show. So
yeah, very quickly, I'll just say, I don't, because people have asked me, and I did not leave the Sausage Factory for any dramatic reason. People thought perhaps there was tension or something behind. There really was not. I had just sort of lost interest in what we were doing. I didn't have any problem with the show or any of the people at that time. And I just thought I wanted to concentrate on other stuff. And Jay and I had our show going, and I wanted to put more of my efforts into that. So if that clears the air at all, I did not leave this, I wasn't fired or anything either. I don't think anybody actually thought that, but
no.
And I could have gone back pretty much at any time. I think I could go on region free if I wanted to. But
You probably
yeah,
could.
yeah.
I
But
just want to also mention that at the same particular time, I also started watching The Sausage Factory.
right. Well,
Um,
that's important. I was gonna try to tie us into it one way or another.
yes, I started watching the Sausage Factory right around the same time as all this other stuff was happening because Cameron was a part of it. And one time I was sitting in here and it popped up and I saw Cameron's face on there and I'm like, "Oh, what's this?" So I went and I started realizing, "Oh my god, you guys are talking about Friday the 13th." I was like, this I love these people.
Yeah.
This place is great. But I didn't speak
Mm.
because it was called the Sausage Factory. And I'm like,
I was not
oh,
involved in that naming.
I know. And I'm like, oh, wait, should I even be in here? I don't want to speak out and say something in the chat and then have them all like freak out that there's a chick in here,
Mm.
or like maybe they're bad people and I don't know it
Yeah.
because they come up with this name. I had
Yeah.
no idea.
Yeah.
So
As
I
much
just
as I don't care for the name, wasn't involved. I'm sure you did find out that that was just the joke about it. It wasn't.
I know.
It didn't mean no girls allowed. It's just like, oh, it's just all guys. I guess.
I know. I
I was
found that out.
disappointed that like when we were trying to name it, like that was one of the first things suggested, and Piz just loved it so much that was the like again. I don't care. I've got the shirt over there. I guess I'm proud of it. Whatever. But I was a little disappointed at the time that Piz he heard it and that was it. There was no more discussion. It was his show, so that's how it went, and it's not a big deal. I don't care, but as you said, the name could be misinterpreted, I guess, at times.
And
Piz
by
said it
me,
was hard reaching out to like people when we want to talk to actors and directors and things
yes.
like that. They're really going to take them seriously. One
Yeah.
guy even asked if it was like a gay thing or something like that. I don't know who it was.
Oh my god.
Piz wouldn't name names, but he said one guy actually asked. He's like, is everybody on it gay or something? And he's like,
Oh my god.
no. I don't know
Yeah.
who that was, but apparently somebody did ask that question.
That's hilarious. So I was watching you guys right along with them, and I started, I would tune into you guys every single time you were on because I was like, these guys are awesome. I can hang with these guys because they know they're talking about all the stuff that I love and that I grew up with. So, but I didn't want to talk in the chat. I would just listen to the shows, and watch. Or a lot of times I'd be listening to you guys while I was doing something else, because the conversations were always so good. And I just, that was something that I was attracted to about all of YouTube, as a matter of fact, is
Yeah.
these conglomerate shows where there were many people on a panel all having good conversations. So you guys were definitely like my second favorite on YouTube. So I would watch you guys. Finally, one day, I just got it in my head. I'm like, I'm sick of sitting here not saying anything. I know things. I want to talk. So I asked. I'm like, hi. I don't know if you guys will care or not. I'm a female. I just wondered if girls are allowed to talk in here because you're named the Sausage Factory and everything. And everybody's laughing and like, no, girls can talk in here. You can talk. So I started talking. I gained more confidence. And even then, though, that was when you were still on there, and I hadn't gotten involved with Lauren yet. Lauren, about a year later, is on Cameron's show. And he's on Cameron's show talking about Hellfest. And I come into the chat and I'm like, I freaking love Hellfest.
He was a big fan of that, yeah.
Yes.
I remember.
And so Lauren's like, hey, she likes Hellfest. We can be friends. And then him and I started communicating. And then pretty soon, Lauren and Cameron both come to me and they say, hey, the Sausage Factory is going to be making some changes and they want to add a female element to the show. And we put your name on the table. We hope you're not mad. And I'm like, me? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh boy, I am so into this idea. I cannot wait. I am stoked. So I said yes. And then Lauren started doing his little quiz shows. His quiz shows that he was doing.
I remember them.
And I was on a bunch of them and I did very, very well.
That's probably the first time I saw it. I think that's the first time I saw you. It wasn't, I knew you had done Twin Peaks stuff, but I think the first time I saw you was doing that quiz thing.
Yeah. I had done very well on all of the shows except for one. And I have to blame the fact that I had a migraine that night and I was really not able to answer I couldn't even see. So I was like,
a handicap.
Yeah. but I did really well on all the other shows, and so I think I proved myself, and I was added. So I was very excited to be added to the Sausage Factory, or former Sausage Factory, now Region Free. Um, and I remember I didn't want to tell the Coffee Time guys at first, because I was like, I had a feeling James was going to get upset about it and think that I was leaving and all this
I
stuff.
don't know him well, but he's an odd fellow, I'll just say.
He is definitely an acquired taste.
I met him a couple times, and he kept calling me by different names. I didn't really know what that meant, but anyway. I rolled with it, as I do. I'm not going to. He obviously
a character.
He has a thing that he does.
Yes. So. But so it took me it was about a month later that I finally told them. I said, hey, how I've been going on Lauren's show quite a bit, and they're like, yeah. And I said, well, I am the newest member of Sausage Factory, former Sausage Factory, now called Region Free. And he's like, what? And then they were like, you're going to leave. And I was like, no, I'm not going to leave. I swear to God, I'm not going to leave. And I really didn't plan on leaving. I planned on, kind of taking them along with me for the ride. And James just, I don't know, I guess he just couldn't handle it or something. And he got madder and madder at me, and it caused tension. And then I eventually left. So not that I won't ever go on Coffee Time again, because I totally am willing, and I'm still friends with those guys. And
okay, so that continues. I wasn't sure if that still goes. Okay.
Yeah, well, at least me and James are still friends. We still talk all the time. He's I consider him to be one of my good friends, and people don't understand it, but James is an acquired taste, and I have a psychology background. So it interests me. So yeah. But yeah, so basically that's how it went down. And so I started on Region Free, and I was on a lot of shows last year. This year hasn't been as many. Just because I've been suffering a little bit from my illness, and it's been causing me to be extremely tired and have a lot of sore throats and upset stomachs and all of these
things. I'm trying to do more stuff this year, because last year was a disaster for me in some ways too. And Jay and I, our show did not get nearly as amount of episodes as we wanted. So we're trying to be more proactive about this. And that's why I was trying to be a little more aggressive about doing extra things like this, because I so much wanted to talk with you. Little side note, I don't know if you know, but Cameron wound up on the Sausage Factory because he was pretty proactive, because I didn't know who he was, and I didn't know his channel or anything like that. But I didn't know who he was, and he reached out to me, actually. He might have reached out to others, and I don't know if they ignored him or what, but he did reach out to me, and he said he'd like to have me on his show. And I said, sure. And I said, can I take Orc? And he said, yeah, I'd love you to take Orc. So there's a couple episodes where Orc and I are on, and we talk about the Sausage Factory. And within a few weeks, he gotten in good, and he was on the show. So, and he was probably only the second person I'd ever met in my life that was a big Twin Peaks fan, besides my friend Sam, turned me on to the show. And it was also the first time I thought about Twin Peaks in a long time. I don't remember how many years ago this was. Was this like maybe 6 years ago? It was before the new Twin Peaks happened, obviously. But it wasn't too far off. It might have been 6-7 years ago, something like that. And it was what sort of put it back in my mind. It's like, oh yeah, I did like Twin Peaks, because what had happened was in the sort of early mid 2000s, when I was living in my first apartment, that's when Sam, when we rented the series, and I finally sat down and actually watched it, and was just so interested by it, especially when I thought of when it did come out, like what the television landscape was like in 1990, and then to have something totally different. Something so different. And on the outside, it's like a Trojan horse, because it's like, oh. It's like a lot of stuff we see. It's like, who killed this girl?
Yes.
Okay, we've seen that. And then it unravels. And even what's cool is like even the first episode, by the time the first episode's over, it's something different.
Yes.
It's one of the best. Like, I'm not a show person. You have to talk to people like Jay or Eric for shows. But I do like Twin Peaks. I have to say, at least in my limited experience, like it's hard to find a better pilot or opening episode
I know, it's
than
so
that.
good.
In some ways, like I'm a fan of that, like on its own, without anything else. Like I do like the show and I like where it
Yeah,
goes, but in some ways, like I am a Twin Peaks fan in the context of just that first episode because it is so enchanting and entrancing, and it presents itself as one thing, but it's something else. And I don't know what kind of direction the actors were given, but all the choices they make are so interesting to me too. Because sometimes it's like cheesy soap opera, and then it
yeah,
turns on a dime, And I even now with TV having evolved and changed so much, it's hard to come up with something that does that.
yeah,
Again, I'm not the best example because I don't really follow shows. You know, if a show is like 7 or 8 seasons, like if I made it to season 3, that's kind of a miracle. Like I don't stick with shows. It's not because they're not good. I don't know. I'm a books, comics, and movie guy, I guess, at heart. I like lots of shows, but I don't know. Shows that are like those sorts of dramas that have like arcs and things. It's funny because nowadays, what shows do is they follow comics. They
yes.
follow comics as example of like having various arcs and things like that, and changing creative teams and things. It's like the template comics book down, and it's not like I don't think it works for TV. In fact, it works beautifully in many ways. I don't know. There's probably stuff I've missed out on over the years, I'm sure. I just don't seem to be wired that way. But I will say, Twin Peaks was interesting. It was an outlier to me. I own the series. I mean, I don't have it on Blu-ray. I should get it on Blu-ray. But I have that cool gold series that I
The
like very
gold
much.
set's good, but
Yeah.
I bought the blue one. I wanted because I was getting
I'd get that. I'd like to get that.
it was expensive.
Yeah.
It was expensive, but it was worth it for me because I knew that I was going to be doing this Twin Peaks thing on here, and I wanted to get all caught up on everything. And I felt like if I was going to actually do this seriously and take it seriously, I needed to actually own it all. So I bought everything. Also, I want to mention real quick that
Yep.
Cameron has put out his Queen of Hearts movie.
Right.
And the first act has a line in it by James where he says sweet butter chicken, which I think is hilarious.
Yes, I remember, yeah.
Act 4, I'm in it.
I have not seen that far.
I
have seen 3? Yeah, I've seen 3. So
I'm
yet to
in
see
Act 4.
Yet to see Act 4. So that'll be interesting to see you. Yeah.
Well, you don't see me.
Oh,
you hear me.
Oh.
I am forever and forevermore a pixie in the Black Lodge.
Very
so
nice.
When you hear the pixies, it's me and one other girl.
When I was like 21, 22, I was in a student film, but it seems to have disappeared off the face of the earth. It was like this weird short student film, but I was like the only person on screen. It was like, I was 22, but I'm a young looking person. I'm going to be 39 next month. Thank you. No, but so I look pretty young at 22. Plus, at the time, I had my hair dyed some sort of like bright, maybe fuchsia color. So I got cast to be like sort of like a 14, 15-year-old. And it was supposed to be like, the whole thing is just one shot. It's me on a couch with like a PlayStation 2 controller. And it's supposed to be, I'm on the couch constantly playing the game. And there's an off-screen mother who I have dialogue with. And it's about 15 minutes long. But I don't know. Maybe the person destroyed the film because it doesn't seem to be anywhere. It's not like I'm great in it or anything.
I also did do one other movie where
so at least you were in something that actually there's a record of and exists. Yeah.
It's called That's the Thing, and it's just a little short movie, and I'm not in it like my face or anything. It's just my voice. I'm leaving an answering machine message to my boyfriend telling him that I'm pregnant. And so dramatic. Then from there on, after he gets the message, it's like this very surreal Lynchian thing where he's showing all his emotions and how he feels about knowing that his dreams are over because of this baby coming. And it's really interesting. And I'm pretty proud of it. But again, COVID happened and he was supposed to put that through some sort of circuit in the UK. And he never did because of COVID, or at least I don't think he did. And if he did, he hasn't mentioned it. So
maybe it could still happen.
It could.
Maybe
it could
find out.
But Cameron putting me in his movie means so much to me because I am a huge Twin Peaks fan. And for me to be in a Twin Peaks project, whether it's canon or not,
No, I
it is
mean,
canon to
it's
me
still,
now.
it's part of the lore,
It is. And what Cameron has done is he's bridged so many different things. Like he took things from the books,
Yeah,
he
he
took things from
obviously
the tapes.
put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah.
You can tell.
And he's bridged everything and made explanations for things that we never had explanations for before. So I think it's brilliant. And I say everybody go to the Annie Blackburn channel and go check it out because it's really good. And Act 5 should be coming out soon.
Right.
And after Act 5 is out, that's it.
Right.
5 acts.
So there's that. Check out
In a
Jamie
minute.
on. Oh, well, I mean, there's that. There's check out Jamie on Region Free.
Yes.
And you do some guest spots here and there. You're going to be. Oh, is it
I believe I'm on tomorrow.
Right, you're on. Yeah, you're on tomorrow. But aren't you also gonna be on Friday?
On the Horror Rumble on cable channel 11.
Right. Jess.
Yes.
It's Jess. Why am I screwing up his name? I've done stuff with him. He's been on my channel. I'm such a jackass. I can't remember. But of course, Jess Graham. That's Jess Graham, of course.
Yep. Jess. So. Yep. It's going to be a Nightmare on Elm Street Horror Rumble, and I'm very excited because I have every one of those movies. So I'm excited about talking about those.
That's awesome.
I love that. I love that series.
So we can pretty much, I guess, finish up because this is feeling out, and maybe we didn't. I'm sure there's stuff I wanted to get to that was going to occur to me later. But one thing that I was thinking about, like in future, is there's like live commentaries I'd like to do that I think you'd be better suited for. Maybe that we might be able to put together. One of them was Harry Potter. Because that's been on my brain lately. Because I watched they did their 20th anniversary thing, and I watched it, and now I'm reading the books. I read a book, I watch the movie. I read a book, I watch the movie. Now I'm on the end. So it's been in my brain a lot. So that I would like to, whether it's by myself if it takes it. But I figured it'd be better, and I know you have at least an opinion on that stuff, right?
Oh, I've seen each one of them 100 times each.
Right. So
I know.
So you like them. So you have plenty to say. In fact, it'll be annoying because I know a big part of, and here's a good warning for anybody that's going to watch this if this happens, is I'm going to spend a lot of the time talking about the differences between the books and the movies. And a lot of it will come across as whining or complaining because there's a lot of changes they make that I don't like. But anyway, I do like the movies as a whole. The only movie I think that is truly not very good is Order of the Phoenix, and that's only because it's the longest book and the shortest movie, so it just moves at a breakneck pace. And I will say the only book I don't like is, like a lot of people, Deathly Hallows. I think she does not stick the landing. I find it very disappointing on many levels. But I find the movies are slightly better than the book, the two movies they make on it. So that's the inversion. I would say the fourth book is my favorite book, but the third movie is my favorite movie by virtue of being a bit shorter, so they don't have to cut things out. The fourth movies are very good. Yeah, and I like that director. He adds an interesting style to it. That's the guy, I forget his name, but he did Blindness and he did Children of Men. Very artistic guy. But anyway, so that'd be great if we could get through that series. I know that would obviously take a little while with schedules and stuff, but I just, that's the first thing that popped into my head, and other things occur to me too. But I knew that we shared that dynamic when it came to things like fantasy. I was like Hannibal Lecter there. Fava beans and a nice Chianti. Oh my God. But yeah, I knew that we shared that, the books and fantasy and some of these movies. And I thought Harry Potter is a big, obvious, great one, a great starting point. So I think that's something hopefully we can get going in the near future and get started. I'd be excited about that. So lovely to have you. And of course, there'll be other conversations where we can touch on some more stuff too, but I don't know. Drag this out too much since we had to, because of technical difficulties, split this up into two. That's
so
not
sorry about that. Gosh,
that's out of your control. These things happen, but yeah, great having you. And this is, I'm glad it took us a while to get this going, to get it together, but it went really well. I'm really pleased. So,
thanks for having me.
And again, if there's anything else, if there's something I forgot to plug or something you want to mention, please certainly go ahead. Or
no, I'm going to be on Region Free tomorrow night, Friday on cable channel 11 with Jess for a horror rumble, and I don't know what's coming up next. My channel will be picking up pace here because summer's coming, and I'm going to be putting more of my hiking videos up, I'm sure. and I'll be putting up more of my opinion videos, and I will be putting up a video for X here pretty quick.
yeah, everybody's seen that except me. I gotta see it.
Yeah, I was saving it for tomorrow night because we're all going to talk about X tomorrow night on Region Free. So I didn't want to put my
So
video
that was my
out
next
yet.
question. I was gonna say, is there something specific for Region Free tomorrow, or is it okay? So they're gonna be doing that. That's cool.
Yeah, that's
Very
one of
cool.
the aspects. Yeah.
Very
So
cool. Okay, so again, thanks so much.
yeah, thanks
being
for
with
having
me,
me.
and we'll do it again, and hopefully we can get some of those live commentaries together. I know it's ambitious, but I think it would be really great. I think it would be
Yeah,
cool.
it'll be fun.
And honestly, you're the best person for it. I think that I know.
Thanks.
I think so. So that'll
Thanks.
be really great. So thanks so much. And so and we thank you, everybody that watched. I know it was a little uneven, but we stuck it out. We got through it. So thanks a lot for being with us. And we'll see you all next time on various channels in the world of YouTube. So peace out. Bye bye, guys.